I swiped my badge for the 5th time, each beep a reminder of my failure. The scanner finally recognized me with a green flash, allowing me into the call center's back entrance. The same door I'd used for 8 months, yet it still treated me like an intruder. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting that sickly glow that made everyone look half dead. Maybe we were. I shuffled past rows of identical cubicles toward my own little cell, number 37, distinguished only by a small cactus I'd bought during a moment of optimism. "Rogers, you're cutting it close." My supervisor Dave glanced at his watch with exaggerated concern. 2 more minutes, and you'd be explaining yourself to HR. Sorry. Traffic. The lie came easily. There hadn't been traffic. I'd just sat in my car, staring at the building, trying to summon the will to come inside. Dave nodded, already walking away. He didn't care about my excuse as long as I made it to my desk before the clock hit 8. That was our relationship, mutual disinterest masked as professional courtesy. I slumped into my chair, logged into the system, and put on my headset. My marketing degree from State hung in a cheap frame on my apartment wall, gathering dust while I repeated the same script day after day. "Thank you for calling TechServe customer support. This is Tyler. How can I help you today?" The morning crawled by. An angry man whose printer wouldn't connect. A confused elderly woman who'd accidentally changed her language settings. A teenager trying to get free upgrades by claiming his perfectly functional tablet was defective. During my lunch break, I sat alone in the break room, picking at a sad sandwich while scrolling through job listings on my phone. Marketing coordinator, marketing assistant, social media specialist. I'd applied to dozens of positions over the past year, each rejection chipping away at whatever confidence I had left. The afternoon shift started with a call from a woman who screamed at me for 10 minutes about a $30 charge. I apologized, explained company policy, apologized again. My voice stayed level while my free hand clenched into a fist under the desk. "Is there anything else I can help you with today?" I asked when she finally ran out of steam. "You haven't helped me with anything," she snapped before hanging up. I took off my headset and rubbed my temples. 4 more hours to go. At 5:30, I practically ran to the exit, desperate for fresh air. The parking lot was half empty, most of my coworkers equally eager to escape. I dug through my pockets for my keys, already thinking about the frozen dinner waiting at home and whatever mindless show I could use to numb my brain for a few hours. That's when I saw him. A sleek black sedan was parked next to my beat-up Honda, making it look even more pathetic by comparison. A man leaned against the luxury car, arms crossed, watching me with an amused smile. It took me a second to recognize him. "Dakota?" He pushed himself off the car and spread his arms. The one and only. Dakota Farrell. My best friend since 3rd grade who'd disappeared 6 months ago with barely a goodbye text. The last I'd heard, he was working at his uncle's insurance office, complaining about the same dead-end feeling that consumed me now. But this wasn't the Dakota I remembered. This Dakota wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His dark hair was styled in a way that looked effortlessly perfect, and on his wrist, was that a Rolex? "What happened to you?" I asked, unable to hide my shock. "You look successful?" He laughed, the sound confident and easy. "That's because I am." I stood there in my wrinkled button-down and scuffed shoes, suddenly aware of how shabby I must look. "Where have you been? You just vanished." Dakota's smile softened slightly. "I got an opportunity, Ty, the kind that comes once in a lifetime." He gestured to the car to himself. "This is just the beginning." "Insurance business must be booming," I said, trying to keep my tone light despite the envy curling in my stomach. He laughed again. "I'm not in insurance anymore. I found something better. Much better." "What? Did you rob a bank? Join the mob?" I was only half joking. Dakota stepped closer, lowering his voice even though we were alone in the parking lot. Have you ever heard of the collective? I shook my head. They find people with potential, real potential that's being wasted. His eyes fixed on mine. People like you, Tyler. A chill ran through me despite the warm evening air. What are you talking about? I told them about you, about your ideas in college, your marketing campaigns that should have won awards, about how that brain of yours is rotting in this place. He gestured dismissively at the call center behind us. They want to meet you. I took a step back. Who's they? What is this collective? It's not something I can explain in a parking lot. Dakota reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. It was plain white with just a phone number printed in black. Call me tomorrow morning if you want to know more. Take the day off. Tell them you're sick. I can't just... Yes, you can. His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Look at yourself, Ty. Look at your life. You think anyone in that building would care if you never came back? The words stung because they were true. I took the card, turning it over in my hand. This sounds sketchy as hell, you know that, right? Dakota's smile returned, confident and knowing. 6 months ago, I was exactly where you are now, stuck, going nowhere. Now look at me. He straightened his designer tie. The collective saw what others didn't. They can do the same for you. He opened the door to his sedan, the interior leather gleaming. Think about it. Call me tomorrow if you want out of this life. As he drove away, I stood there holding the card, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to throw it away. This had all the markings of some weird cult or pyramid scheme. But another part, the desperate part that died a little each time I swiped my badge, couldn't help wondering. What if this was real? What if this was my chance? I slept badly that night, tossing and turning as I weighed my options. By morning, curiosity had won out over caution. I called in sick, my supervisor barely bothering to hide his disinterest in my well-being, then dialed the number on the card. Dakota answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting. I knew you'd call. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown at noon. I arrived early, fidgeting nervously as I waited. The place was upscale, with exposed brick walls and artisanal everything. I felt out of place in my jeans and faded t-shirt. Dakota arrived exactly at noon, still looking like he'd stepped out of a business magazine. He ordered us both complicated coffee drinks I couldn't afford on my salary and led me to a quiet corner table. So, I said after an awkward silence, the collective. What is it? A company? A club? He took a sip of his coffee. It's more than that. It's a community of exceptional people who recognize other exceptional people. And they think I'm exceptional? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. I know how it sounds, Dakota said, but they have a gift for seeing potential where others don't. They saw it in me. I told them about you, and they're interested. Interested in what? What do they want from me? They want to give you a chance to be who you were meant to be. He leaned forward. Remember our marketing project senior year? The campaign that Professor Winters said was too ambitious? You had vision, Ty. Real vision. And now you're wasting it asking people if they've tried turning their printers off and on again. I winced. It pays the bills. Barely. Dakota pulled out a small notepad and wrote something down. This is your chance to escape, to use that brain of yours for something that matters. He slid the paper across the table. An address was written in neat handwriting, followed by 3 p.m. What's this? Your interview. Today, they're expecting you. I stared at the paper. Today, I can't just... Yes, you can. Dakota's tone was firm. This is how it works. They don't wait around. Either you want this opportunity or you don't. I looked up at him, searching his face for some clue about what I was getting myself into. Can you at least tell me more about what they do? What you do for them? He smiled. I identify talent. I bring people like you to their attention. Beyond that, he shrugged. Each person's role is different, based on their abilities. You'll understand when you meet them. And if I don't go? Dakota's expression turned serious. Then you go back to your cubicle tomorrow, and the next day, and the next. Nothing changes. You keep dying slowly until one day you wake up and realize your whole life passed while you were helping strangers with their tech problems. He stood up, adjusting his cuffs. The address is about 2 hours from here. Don't be late. First impressions matter. With that, he left, leaving me alone with an address, a cooling coffee, and a decision to make. I sat there for nearly an hour, turning the paper over in my hands. This could be a scam, a cult, something dangerous. But the alternative, going back to that call center tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, seemed suddenly unbearable. At 1 o'clock, I got in my car. The GPS took me out of the city, through suburbs that gradually gave way to countryside. The roads narrowed and began to wind upward into mountains I rarely visited, despite living so close to them. Cell service became spotty, the bars on my phone dropping one by one until I was navigating solely by the GPS's increasingly uncertain directions. My Honda struggled on the steeper inclines, the engine whining in protest. I passed fewer and fewer houses, the landscape becoming more remote with each mile. Doubt crept in as I drove deeper into isolation. What was I doing, following mysterious directions to meet strangers in the middle of nowhere? But then I thought about Dakota. The change in him was undeniable. Whatever this collective was, it had transformed my formerly average friend into someone confident and successful. The Rolex alone must have cost thousands. I checked the time, 2:45. According to the GPS, I was getting close. The road curved around a mountainside, and suddenly the trees cleared to reveal a valley below. In the center, nestled among manicured grounds, stood what could only be described as a compound. Modern buildings of glass and stone spread across several acres, connected by pathways and surrounded by a high fence. This was it, the collective. As I drove down toward the entrance gate, questions tumbled through my mind. What had changed Dakota so dramatically? What did these people want with me? And what exactly was this place that promised to recognize my untapped potential? Most importantly, was I about to make the biggest mistake of my life, or finally escape the prison of mediocrity I'd built for myself? The gate loomed ahead, a security camera tracking my approach. I took a deep breath and rolled down my window, ready to announce myself to whatever waited beyond. I pulled up to the security gate, my hands tight on the steering wheel. The address Dakota had given me led here, to a sprawling mansion built into the mountainside. The place looked more like a billionaire's retreat than any business headquarters I'd seen before. A guard stepped out of the gatehouse, his face blank as he approached my car. I rolled down my window, feeling small in my beat-up sedan. "Name?" he asked. "Tyler Rogers. I have an appointment with ID." He cut me off, holding out his hand. I fumbled for my wallet and handed over my driver's license. He studied it, then glanced at a tablet in his other hand. Above us, a security camera swiveled to point directly at my face. I fought the urge to duck away from its gaze. "Wait here," the guard said, walking back to the gatehouse. Through my windshield, I counted at least 4 more cameras mounted along the perimeter wall. Each one seemed to track my car as if I might make a break for it. What kind of place needed this much security? Dakota hadn't mentioned anything about this level of whatever this was. The guard returned after a few minutes and handed back my license. "Drive through and park in the visitor section to your right. Someone will meet you at the main entrance." The gate slid open with a mechanical hum. I drove through slowly, following a curved driveway that revealed more of the property. The main building looked like something out of an architectural magazine, all glass, stone, and angular design built right into the mountainside. More cameras dotted the exterior walls, tracking my approach. I parked where directed and sat for a moment, trying to calm my nerves. This wasn't what I'd expected at all. Dakota had talked about an opportunity, a group that recognized potential. He hadn't mentioned a fortress. At the entrance, Another guard checked my ID again, this time taking a photo with a handheld device. He compared it to something on his screen, then nodded. "Arms out, please," he said. "You're searching me?" I asked. "Standard procedure for all visitors." I stood with my arms extended while he ran a handheld metal detector over me. After he finished, a woman in a tailored suit appeared from around a corner. "Mr. Rogers," she said with a practiced smile. "I'm Amelia Lane, receptionist for the collective. We've been expecting you. Please follow me." She led me through a set of glass doors that slid open automatically. The lobby beyond made my jaw drop. The floor was polished marble that reflected the light from massive windows overlooking the mountain landscape. The walls featured artwork that belonged in museums, paintings and sculptures that probably cost more than I'd make in 10 years at the call center. "This is not what I expected," I said, my voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. Amelia's smile didn't waver. "The collective believes in surrounding ourselves with beauty and excellence. It helps inspire our members." We passed a water feature where a sheet of water flowed over a wall of black granite. Everything looked expensive and meticulously maintained. My cheap shoes squeaked on the marble, making me feel even more out of place. "What exactly does the collective do?" I asked as we walked. "Ms. Strickland will explain everything," Amelia replied, offering nothing more. She led me down a hallway lined with more artwork to a conference room with a glass table and sleek chairs. One wall was entirely glass, offering a view of the mountains. "Please have a seat. Ms. Strickland will be with you shortly. Would you like water or coffee while you wait?" "Water would be good, thanks," I said, my mouth suddenly dry. After Amelia left, I sat alone in the quiet room, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. The chair was more comfortable than anything at the call center. The water arrived in an actual glass, not a paper cup. Everything here screamed money and power. About 10 minutes later, the door opened. A woman in her 50s entered the room. She had silver hair pulled back severely from her face and wore a charcoal gray suit that looked custom-made. But it was her eyes that caught my attention, dark, intense, and focused entirely on me in a way that made me want to squirm in my seat. "Tyler Rogers," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm Florence Strickland." She sat across from me, placing a thick manila folder on the table between us. My name was written on the tab. "Thank you for coming today," she said, her voice measured and controlled. "Dakota speaks highly of your potential." "He didn't tell me much about what you do here," I admitted. Florence opened the folder. "That's by design. We prefer to evaluate candidates directly." She glanced down at the papers inside. "You graduated from state with a degree in marketing 4 years ago. Since then, you've worked at Techline Support Center, taking customer service calls for various electronics products." I shifted in my chair. "That's right. Your performance reviews show competence but not advancement. You've applied for 14 promotions within the company, all denied." She looked up at me. "Your supervisor notes that while you handle difficult customers well, you seem disengaged." My face grew hot. "How do you have my performance reviews?" Florence ignored my question. "You live alone in a 1-bedroom apartment. You have $43,000 in student loan debt. Your credit score is fair but declining. You have few close relationships. Your parents live 3 states away, and you've lost touch with most college friends." The accuracy of her assessment made my skin crawl. This wasn't information Dakota could have given her. This was deep background research. "What is this?" I asked, my voice tighter than I wanted it to be. Florence closed the folder. "This is the first step in determining if you're right for us and if we're right for you." She leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, Tyler, what do you want from your life?" The question caught me off guard. I want what most people want, I guess. Success, purpose. "And do you feel you're on the path to either of those things right now?" I looked down at my hands. "No. Why not?" "The opportunities aren't there. I'm stuck in a job that doesn't use my skills or challenge me. I send out resumes, but nothing ever comes of it." Florence nodded. "And if the right opportunity presented itself, how far would you go to seize it?" "What do you mean? Would you be willing to commit to something beyond yourself? To dedicate yourself completely to achieving your potential?" There was something in her tone that made me uneasy, but I couldn't put my finger on it. "I think so. Yes." She studied me for a long moment. The collective was founded 30 years ago with a simple mission: to identify individuals with untapped potential and provide them with the resources, guidance, and community needed to achieve extraordinary things. "What kind of things?" I asked. "Innovation, creation, advancement beyond what conventional society believes possible." She gestured to the view outside. "We've built this sanctuary away from the limitations and distractions of everyday life. Here, our members focus entirely on their work and development." "So it's like a think tank?" A smile touched her lips but didn't reach her eyes. "That's a limited description, but not entirely inaccurate. We believe that human potential is constrained by societal structures, the 9-to-5 workday, financial pressures, social obligations. By removing those constraints, we free our members to achieve what they're truly capable of." It sounded almost too good to be true. "And what do you get out of it?" "The collective shares in the success of its members. The innovations developed here have applications across industries: technology, medicine, design, marketing. We all benefit from each other's achievements." She stood and walked to the window. "Dakota recognized something in you, Tyler. A capacity for more than what you're doing now. I see it too. You're not meant to waste away in a call center cubicle." Her words hit a nerve. Wasn't that exactly what I'd been thinking for years? "What would joining the collective mean, exactly?" I asked. Florence turned back to me. "It would mean complete commitment. Our members live here, at the compound. They leave their former lives behind: jobs, apartments, routines. Everything here is provided: housing, meals, facilities, resources. In return, you dedicate yourself to the work." "You mean move here, permanently?" "Initially for a trial period of 6 months. After that, we evaluate whether the relationship should continue." I tried to process what she was saying. Leave everything behind. But then again, what was I really leaving? A dead-end job? A cramped apartment? Bills I could barely pay? "This is a lot to take in," I said. "Of course." Florence returned to her seat. "This isn't a decision to make lightly. But consider this. Where will you be in 5 years if you continue on your current path? And where might you be if you join us?" The question hung in the air between us. I knew the answer to the first part all too well. Still at the call center, still struggling, still feeling that my life was slipping away one customer complaint at a time. "What would I actually do here?" I asked. "You would join a team working on projects aligned with your skills and potential. You'd receive mentorship, resources, and the freedom to explore ideas without the constraints you face now." She leaned forward. "We see possibilities in you that others have missed, Tyler, including yourself." Her words were like a hook, pulling at something deep inside me, a hunger for validation, for someone to see value in me. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course." Florence stood. "Take the weekend to consider. We'll expect your answer on Monday." As she walked me back to the lobby, she added, "One thing to understand, Tyler. The collective requires discretion. If you choose to join us, you'll need to be selective about what you share with outsiders. Our work here is sensitive." The way she said it sent a chill through me, but I nodded anyway. At the entrance, Emilia handed me a packet of information and a business card with Florence's name and a phone number. "For when you're ready to give us your decision," she explained. The drive home was a blur. My mind raced with possibilities. Leaving the call center behind, starting fresh in that beautiful compound, being part of something that seemed important. but there was also unease, questions about what exactly I'd be getting into. By Monday morning, though, my decision was made. I called the number on the card. "I want to join," I told Florence when she came on the line. "What do I need to do?" "Excellent," she replied, sounding unsurprised. "Tie up your affairs quickly. We expect you at the compound in 1 week." The next few days passed in a flurry of activity. I gave notice at work, where Dave seemed more annoyed by the paperwork than sad to see me go. I broke my apartment lease, packed what little I wanted to keep, and donated the rest. I called my parents with a vague explanation about a new job opportunity that required relocation. By Friday, I stood in my empty apartment one last time, keys in hand, ready to turn them in to the landlord. Everything I owned now fit in my car. It should have felt scary to leave it all behind, but instead, I felt lighter than I had in years. The following Monday, I drove back up to the compound, this time passing through security with less scrutiny. Amelia met me at the entrance, that same practiced smile on her face. "Welcome to the collective, Tyler," she said. "Let me show you to your quarters." She led me through a different section of the building to what she called the residential wing. The hallways were quiet and clean, with the same expensive aesthetic as the rest of the place. My quarters turned out to be larger and more luxurious than my apartment had been. A spacious bedroom with a king-sized bed, a sitting area with comfortable furniture, a private bathroom with a shower and separate tub, and a small kitchenette. "All meals are provided in the dining hall, but you're welcome to keep snacks here," Amelia explained. "Your closet has been stocked with appropriate attire." She gestured to a sleek wardrobe against one wall. I opened it to find rows of clothes, casual wear, exercise clothes, and more formal options, all in my size. "How did you know?" "We take care of everything," Amelia said simply. "Your orientation begins tomorrow at 9. For today, feel free to settle in and explore the residential areas. Your key card will indicate which spaces are accessible to you." After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, running my hand over the expensive comforter. Everything here was nicer than anything I'd ever owned. I walked to the window, which overlooked a courtyard garden with stone pathways and carefully tended plants. For the first time in years, I felt a surge of hope. This place, this opportunity, it was everything my life had been missing. Purpose, recognition, a chance to be more than just another voice on a customer service line. Whatever the collective wanted from me, I was ready to give it. This was my chance to finally become someone who mattered. I sat in the main conference room with 9 other recruits, each of us looking as uncomfortable as I felt. The room had that sterile, corporate smell, like furniture polish and air conditioning. We'd been waiting for 15 minutes, and the silence was getting awkward. Some people were checking their phones, others staring at the wall. I glanced at the woman across from me, who kept adjusting her glasses and smoothing her black hair. Next to her, a guy with curly hair tapped his fingers nervously on the table. The door finally opened, and a woman walked in with the kind of purposeful stride that made everyone sit up straighter. She wore a navy pantsuit and had auburn hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. "Good morning. I'm Mary Daniels, and I'll be your supervisor for your first project at the collective." Her voice was clipped and efficient. "When I call your name, please raise your hand so everyone can identify you." She went through the list quickly. When she called Brooke Sandoval, the woman with glasses raised her hand. Benny Banks turned out to be the finger tapper with curly hair. When she got to my name, I raised my hand, feeling oddly like I was back in elementary school. Mary set down her tablet and looked at us with sharp green eyes. "You have all been selected because our evaluation process identified specific creative potential in each of you. Now it's time to prove we made the right choice." She tapped something on the wall panel, and a screen descended from the ceiling. "Your team assignment is simple. In 30 days, you will develop an innovative product concept that addresses an unmet market need. This concept must be fully realized with marketing strategy, financial projections, and a working prototype, if applicable." Someone let out a small, nervous laugh. Mary's eyes snapped to them. Is something amusing about this assignment? A guy at the end of the table shook his head quickly. No, ma'am, just 30 days seems tight for all that. The collective doesn't operate on conventional timelines, Mr. Peterson. We expect exceptional results in compressed time frames. Mary's gaze swept over all of us. This is your first evaluation. Teams that excel will receive expanded privileges and opportunities. Those that fail to meet expectations will face reassignment. The way she said reassignment made my stomach tighten. You'll be working in teams of 3. Team assignments are on your tablets. Mary gestured to the devices in front of us. You have access to any resources you need within reason. Submit requests through your team portal. I picked up my tablet and found my team assignment, Brooke Sandoval and Benny Banks. I looked up and caught their eyes across the table. Brooke gave me a small nod. Your team spaces are assigned. You'll find the locations on your tablets as well. Mary checked her watch. You have 30 minutes for lunch, then report to your team space to begin work. The clock starts now. As Mary left, the room filled with nervous chatter. I walked over to where Brooke and Benny were sitting. I guess we're working together, I said, extending my hand. Tyler Rogers. Brooke shook it firmly. Brooke Sandoval. I was a high school economics teacher before this. Benny Banks, electrical engineer. Well, unemployed electrical engineer now. He had a quiet voice that matched his nervous demeanor. Should we grab lunch and talk about the project? I suggested. We found the dining hall easily enough. It was like an upscale cafeteria with actual good food, nothing like the sad break room at the call center. We filled our trays and found a quiet corner table. So what brought you both here? I asked between bites of surprisingly good pasta. Layoffs at my school district, Brooke said. I was looking at job listings when someone from the collective contacted me. Said they'd been tracking my work with the Student Business Incubator program. Benny pushed his food around his plate. My company outsourced our entire department. I was 6 months unemployed when my college roommate told me about this place. Said they were looking for people who think differently. He looked up. What about you? My friend Dakota recruited me. I was stuck in a call center job I hated. I didn't mention how Dakota had changed, how different he seemed now. Did either of you expect this? Brooke gestured around at the compound. The security, the facilities, all of it? I shook my head. Not even close. I thought it might be some kind of startup. The NDA I signed was 26 pages, Benny said quietly. I've worked on classified projects before, but nothing like this. We finished eating quickly, aware of Mary's 30-minute deadline. Our team space turned out to be a small but well-equipped room with a glass wall that could be frosted for privacy, 3 workstations, a central table, and a digital whiteboard covering one wall. Okay, I said as we settled in. 30 days to create an innovative product concept. Where do we start? Brooke pulled out a notebook. I think we should begin by identifying market gaps. What needs aren't being met? Benny nodded. I can research existing technologies we could leverage or improve upon. They both looked at me expectantly. I wasn't sure why they seemed to be waiting for my input. At the call center, I was just another cog in the machine. No one had ever looked at me like I had something valuable to contribute. What if we start by thinking about daily frustrations, I suggested. Things that annoy us, but we've just accepted as normal. There might be opportunities there. Brooke's face brightened. That's actually a great approach, very consumer-centered. For the next few hours, we listed every minor annoyance we could think of, from tangled earbuds to forgetting passwords. The whiteboard filled with ideas. I found myself getting excited, building on their suggestions, connecting concepts in ways that made both Brooke and Benny nod enthusiastically. What about this? I said, standing at the whiteboard. We all have too many subscriptions now, right? Streaming services, software, meal kits, whatever. What if there was a single platform that managed all your subscriptions, optimized what you're paying, and alerted you to better deals, or when you're not using something enough to justify the cost? Brooke looked up from her notes. That's actually really smart, Tyler. We could incorporate machine learning to predict usage patterns, Benny added, his earlier nervousness fading as he warmed to the idea, and maybe even negotiate group rates automatically. The ideas kept flowing. By the end of that first day, we had a solid concept outline. As we were wrapping up, Mary stopped by our room, watching through the glass wall before entering. "How's progress?" she asked, her eyes scanning our whiteboard. "We've identified our product concept," I said, surprising myself by taking the lead. "A subscription management platform with AI optimization." Mary's expression didn't change, but she nodded slightly. "Interesting. I'll expect a preliminary outline by tomorrow afternoon." She left without another word. "Is she always that intense?" I asked once she was gone. "I heard she used to work in some elite military program," Brooke said quietly. "Training special forces or something." The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. We'd work long hours in our team space, breaking only for meals. The collective provided everything we needed: research materials, software, even prototype components when Benny wanted to test hardware integration options. I found myself naturally taking on a leadership role. Something about this environment, about being valued for my ideas rather than just my ability to placate angry customers, brought out a side of me I hadn't known existed. I could see connections between concepts, find creative solutions when we hit roadblocks, and somehow keep both Brooke and Benny motivated even when we were exhausted. 2 weeks in, we presented our progress to a panel of evaluators, including Mary and 2 others I didn't recognize. Our concept had evolved into what we called SubSmart, an AI-driven subscription management platform that would analyze spending patterns, usage, and available alternatives to optimize a user's digital footprint. The average American spends over $200 monthly on subscriptions they don't fully utilize, I explained, standing in front of our presentation while Brooke and Benny operated the interactive demo. SubSmart doesn't just track them. It learns from your behavior and makes intelligent recommendations. Benny demonstrated the prototype interface, showing how it could identify overlapping services and calculate actual cost per use. Brooke followed with market analysis and revenue projections that showed substantial growth potential. When we finished, Mary's expression remained neutral, but one of the other evaluators, a thin man with silver-framed glasses, leaned forward with interest. "The predictive algorithm foundation is impressive," he said. "How would you address privacy concerns?" I hadn't anticipated this question, but the answer came to me immediately. "We've designed a hybrid system where sensitive financial data remains local on the user's device. The cloud component only receives anonymized pattern data for optimization." The evaluators exchanged glances. Mary made a note on her tablet. "Thank you," she said, dismissing us without further comment. Back in our team space, Benny collapsed into his chair. "I think that went well. Hard to tell with them." "Tyler, that privacy answer was perfect," Brooke said. "I hadn't even considered that angle." I felt a strange mix of pride and surprise at my own performance. Throughout my life, I'd always been the person who blended into the background. Now I was leading presentations and coming up with solutions on the fly. The next morning, Mary appeared at our door. "Your team has been granted expanded privileges," she announced without preamble. "You now have access to the East Wing facilities, including the Advanced Research Library and the Recreation Center. Your meal options have also been upgraded." After she left, the 3 of us looked at each other in stunned silence before breaking into grins. "We did it," Brooke said. "We're moving up." The expanded privileges made a noticeable difference in our daily lives. The East Wing dining area served better food with actual menu options. The recreation center had a pool, gym equipment, and even a small theater where movies played in the evenings. It felt like we'd been promoted from economy to first class. But as we continued refining our project, I started noticing things that didn't quite add up. Twice a week, we'd see Mary leading groups of tired-looking recruits to a section of the compound I hadn't visited before. These recruits looked different from the ones in our cohort. They moved sluggishly, with dark circles under their eyes and a vacant expression that made me uncomfortable. One day at lunch, I mentioned it to Brooke and Benny. "Have you seen those groups Mary takes to the West Wing? They look rough." Benny glanced around before lowering his voice. "I heard someone call it restoration. Apparently, if you're not performing well, they send you there to get back on track." "That doesn't sound good," Brooke said, frowning. "And have you noticed people just disappearing? That guy Peterson who questioned the timeline in our first meeting? I haven't seen him in 2 weeks." I had noticed. Several faces from our initial orientation were simply gone, with no explanation given. When I'd asked another recruit about one of the missing people, they'd quickly changed the subject. Our own project continued to progress well. We were building a working demo that could actually track and analyze real subscription data. Benny had created an elegant interface, while Brooke developed a business model that showed impressive potential returns. I kept refining the concept, finding new applications and features that made the product more valuable. 3 days before our deadline, Mary visited our workspace again. "Your final presentation will be tomorrow at 10 a.m., she announced. "The executive committee will be in attendance, including Ms. Strickland." My stomach tightened at the mention of Florence. I hadn't seen her since my arrival 3 months ago. "I thought we had until Friday," Brooke said, looking concerned. "The timeline has been adjusted," Mary replied flatly. 10 a.m., main conference room. She turned to leave, then paused. "Your work has been noteworthy. Don't disappoint us now." We worked through the night, refining every aspect of our presentation. By morning, we were exhausted but confident. Our prototype worked flawlessly, our financial projections were solid, and our marketing strategy was innovative without being unrealistic. The main conference room was intimidating, much larger than the one we'd been in before, with a long table where 5 evaluators sat, including Florence at the center. Mary stood to the side, watching us with her usual intensity. Despite my exhaustion, the presentation flowed naturally. I found myself speaking with confidence I never knew I had, fielding complex questions with thoughtful answers. Brooke and Benny performed their parts perfectly, and the demo worked without a hitch. When we finished, Florence spoke for the first time. Impressive work, particularly given the compressed timeline. Her eyes lingered on me. "Mr. Rogers, your leadership on this project has been noted." The evaluation panel conferred briefly before Florence addressed us again. "Your concept has been approved for further development. Congratulations." Back in our team space, the 3 of us celebrated quietly. Benny actually smiled, a rare sight, and Brooke looked relieved. "We did it," she said. "What happens now?" "I guess we find out," I replied. 2 days later, as we were documenting our process for the next development phase, I saw another group of those exhausted-looking recruits being led down the hallway. This time, I recognized one of them, a woman who had been on one of the other teams during our orientation. Her face was gaunt, her movements mechanical. After our work session ended, I found Mary in her office. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" I asked, standing in her doorway. She gestured for me to enter without looking up from her tablet. "Make it quick, Rogers. I was wondering about some of the recruits from our original orientation. I haven't seen them around lately." Mary's expression hardened slightly. "Not everyone is suited for the work we do here. Those who can't meet expectations are reassigned or released from the program." "Released? You mean they leave the compound?" "In some cases." Her tone made it clear the subject was closed. Was there anything else? I hesitated, then shook my head. "No, that's all. Thank you." As I walked back to my quarters, Mary's dismissive response bothered me more than I wanted to admit. What happened to people who couldn't meet expectations? And what exactly did restoration involve? Despite these concerns, I couldn't deny that I was thriving here. For the first time in my life, my ideas were valued. I was good at this, better than I'd ever been at anything before. The recognition felt intoxicating after years of being overlooked. A week after our successful presentation, I received a message on my tablet requesting my presence in Florence's office the following morning. I read it twice, my heart racing. This was either very good or very bad. Florence's office was on the top floor of the main building, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. She sat behind a glass desk, reviewing something on her screen as I entered. "Tyler, please sit down." She gestured to the chair across from her. "I've been following your progress with interest." "Thank you, Ms. Strickland." "Florence, please." She smiled slightly. "You've been with us for 3 months now. How would you evaluate your experience so far?" I considered my answer carefully. "It's been challenging but rewarding. I feel like I'm using abilities I didn't know I had." "That's precisely what we hoped for." She leaned forward. "The collective exists to identify and nurture exceptional potential. You've demonstrated remarkable leadership and creative problem-solving skills." Pride swelled in my chest at her words. After years of feeling mediocre, hearing that I was exceptional from someone like Florence felt validating in a way I couldn't describe. "We believe you're ready for advancement," she continued. "I'd like to offer you a position overseeing our restoration department." "Restoration?" I tried to keep my voice neutral, remembering those exhausted faces. "It's a program designed to help recruits who have lost their creative spark," Florence explained. "Sometimes people hit walls in their development. The restoration department helps them break through those barriers and reach their full potential." The way she described it sounded reasonable, even compassionate. But something about those vacant expressions I'd seen nagged at me. "What exactly would I be doing?" I asked. "Supervising the restoration process, identifying blocks in creative thinking, implementing techniques to overcome those blocks." Florence's eyes never left mine. "It's challenging work, but vital to our mission, and it would put you on an accelerated path within our leadership structure." Leadership, advancement, recognition, everything I'd wanted and never received in my previous life. "You have a gift for bringing out the best in others, Tyler," Florence continued. "We've seen how you motivated your team, how you helped them push beyond their limitations. That's exactly what we need in the restoration department." Put that way, it sounded like I'd be helping people, not hurting them. And the opportunity to advance further within the collective was tempting. Very tempting. "I'd be honored to accept," I heard myself say. Florence smiled. "Excellent. You'll begin training next week. Mary will provide the details." She stood, indicating our meeting was over. "I have high expectations for you, Tyler. Very high indeed." As I walked back to my quarters, I felt a mixture of pride and unease. I was moving up quickly within the collective, gaining recognition I'd never experienced before. Yet those images of exhausted recruits kept flashing through my mind. What exactly had I just agreed to? And what would this restoration department really entail? Despite my misgivings, I couldn't deny the thrill of advancement, of finally being valued for my abilities. Whatever this new role involved, I told myself I was ready for it. I would prove Florence right about my potential. I would continue to rise within the collective, no matter what that required. I walked down the hallway of the restoration wing for the first time, following Mary as she swiped her access card at a heavy metal door. The lock clicked, and she pushed it open to reveal a corridor I'd never seen before, stark white with recessed lighting that seemed too bright. "This is where we help struggling recruits find their potential," Mary said, her voice matter of fact. "Most people just need the right environment to succeed." I nodded, trying to look confident, though my stomach tightened. 3 weeks into my new role as Florence's protege, and I was finally seeing what restoration actually meant. Mary stopped at a window looking into what appeared to be an interrogation room. Inside, a woman sat at a metal table, hands flat on the surface. 2 staff members in white coats stood on either side of her. The woman's eyes were red-rimmed, and her shoulders hunched forward. Tina's team failed to meet their 3rd milestone, Mary explained. The others showed promise, but she's been holding them back. We're helping her break through her creative blocks. I peered through the glass. One of the staff members leaned down, speaking directly into Tina's ear while the other took notes. The woman flinched. "What are they saying to her?" I asked. "Targeted psychological pressure. We identify their specific insecurities and use them as motivation." Mary checked her watch. "She's been in session for 14 hours. We find that sleep deprivation helps eliminate self-censoring mechanisms." My mouth went dry. 14 hours straight? Mary smiled like I'd asked a naive question. "The most innovative breakthroughs often come after 20 hours. We monitor vital signs, of course." We continued down the hallway. Mary pointed out different rooms, some with flashing lights and loud sounds playing on a loop, others where recruits sat in complete darkness. "Sensory manipulation," she explained, "either overload or deprivation. Both are effective for different personality types." In another room, a young man sat watching video messages that appeared to be from family members, though something seemed off about them. "Are those real?" I asked. "Deepfakes. We create emotional triggers using AI-generated content from photos and videos we gather during the recruitment process. Emotional destabilization can be very effective for breaking down creative barriers." I swallowed hard, thinking about my own recruitment. Had they gathered material to use against me if I failed? "The results speak for themselves," Mary continued, leading me to a wall of digital displays. "These are the before and after metrics of restored recruits." The screen showed dramatic improvements in creative output, productivity scores, and innovation ratings. Nearly every chart showed the same pattern: a steep drop followed by an exponential rise that far exceeded pre-restoration levels. 92% of restored recruits produced their most valuable work within 2 weeks of completing the process, Mary said with unmistakable pride. "Florence believes you have the right mindset to help oversee this department." I stared at the charts, focusing on the results rather than the methods. If it worked so well, maybe the ends justified the means. After all, these people had committed to the collective, just as I had. "I'd like to see a complete restoration cycle," I said, surprised by my own words. Mary nodded approvingly. That's the attitude Florence was hoping for. Over the next few months, I learned every technique in the restoration playbook. I watched as struggling recruits entered the program defeated and emerged, those who made it through, with a strange, intense focus. Their work improved dramatically, just as the charts had promised. I quieted my occasional unease by focusing on my growing responsibilities. Florence had taken a special interest in my development, inviting me to senior leadership meetings and assigning me increasingly important tasks. For the first time in my life, people who mattered saw my potential. When doubts crept in late at night, I'd pull up the performance metrics on my tablet. The numbers didn't lie. Whatever we were doing, it worked. And wasn't that what mattered? By my 4th month at the collective, I had my own office overlooking the mountain range. My wardrobe had been upgraded twice. The other department heads treated me as an equal rather than a newcomer. I'd never felt so valued. In my 6th month, Florence called me to her office. I sat across from her, watching as she reviewed something on her tablet. "Tyler," she said, looking up, "your work in the restoration department has exceeded our expectations." "Thank you," I said, sitting up straighter. "Mary has decided to focus exclusively on our international expansion. We need someone to take over the restoration department." She set down her tablet. "That someone is you." I blinked, processing her words. "You want me to head the entire department?" "Effective immediately. You'll report directly to me and have full autonomy over restoration protocols and personnel decisions." My heart raced. 6 months ago, I'd been taking abuse from angry customers at a call center. Now I was being handed control of one of the collective's most critical departments. "I won't disappoint you," I said. Florence's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I know you won't." 2 weeks into my new role, I received the files for a fresh group of recruits who had just completed their initial assessment period. Most showed promise, but one team was struggling significantly. Their leader, Michael Evans, had the lowest performance metrics I'd ever seen. I studied his file. 22 years old, background in graphic design, recruited after being fired from an advertising agency for lack of initiative. His psychological profile indicated high creative potential, but extreme susceptibility to pressure. "Just like me," I murmured, looking at his intake photo. The nervous eyes, the uncertain smile, I recognized that look. It was the same expression I'd worn 6 months ago. I decided to handle Michael's restoration personally. The first session was basic. I sat across from him in a brightly lit room and reviewed his team's failures. "Your team has missed 2 consecutive milestones," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "What do you think is holding you back?" Michael's eyes darted around the room. I'm trying. We all are. I think we just need more time." "Time isn't the issue. Your problem is fear." I leaned forward. "You're afraid of taking risks, of pushing boundaries. That's why your previous employer let you go, isn't it?" His face flushed. "How did you?" "We know everything about you, Michael. That's how we help you succeed." Over the next week, I escalated the pressure gradually. I restricted Michael's sleep to 4 hours a night. I isolated him from his team except during working sessions, where I criticized his contributions in front of them. I played recordings of his former boss describing his failures on a loop while he tried to work. When that didn't produce results, I moved to more severe methods. I brought in actors who resembled his parents to express disappointment in his performance. I created simulated rejection letters from companies he'd applied to before joining the collective. Each day, I checked the metrics, waiting for the breakthrough. Each day, I pushed a little harder. "You need to break through this block," I told him on the 8th day, as he sat bleary-eyed across from me. "Your team is waiting for you to lead them." "I don't know what you want from me," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I want what you're capable of, not this." I gestured to his latest work. "This is mediocre. You're not mediocre, Michael. You're just afraid to show us who you really are." I recognized the words. They were almost exactly what Florence had said to me during my interview. The difference was, I was saying them while depriving someone of sleep and psychological safety. That night, I reviewed Michael's file again, looking for another angle. His team needed to succeed with their marketing strategy by the end of the week, or they'd all face reassignment. A euphemism I now understood meant more intensive restoration, or worse. The next morning, I tried a new approach. I gathered Michael's team in their workspace and stood before them. "You have 48 hours, I announced. "If you fail, you'll be separated and individually restored. Michael will bear the primary responsibility for your failure." The team looked at Michael, their expressions a mix of fear and resentment. He seemed to shrink under their gaze. "However," I continued, "if you succeed, you'll all receive expanded privileges and consideration for leadership tracks." I turned to leave, then paused at the door. "Michael, a word." He followed me into the hallway, his shoulders hunched. "This is your last chance," I said quietly. "I know you have it in you. Don't let your team down." Something shifted in his eyes, a spark of determination, or perhaps desperation. He nodded once and returned to his team. 40 hours later, my tablet pinged with an alert. Michael's team had submitted their marketing strategy ahead of deadline. I pulled up the file and reviewed their work, my eyes widening as I scrolled through the presentation. It was brilliant, innovative, comprehensive, and perfectly targeted. The metrics confirmed it. Their submissions scored in the 98th percentile of all first-phase projects. I should have felt triumphant. My methods had worked. Michael had broken through his creative blocks and led his team to success. This was what restoration was designed to do. Instead, I felt a creeping disgust as I remembered the look in Michael's eyes when I'd threatened his team. I'd done that. I'd become the person who broke others to make them better. That evening, I sat alone in the compound's executive lounge, nursing a glass of expensive whiskey. The room was empty except for me, the soft lighting and leather furniture a stark contrast to the sterile restoration rooms. Celebrating your success? I looked up to see Florence standing in the doorway, a glass of red wine in her hand. She walked over and sat across from me without waiting for an invitation. Michael's team exceeded expectations, I said, trying to sound pleased. Yes, your methods were quite effective. She sipped her wine. You've adapted to your role even faster than I anticipated. I stared into my glass. What exactly is the purpose of all this, Florence, beyond creating innovative products? She studied me for a moment, then set down her wine. I suppose you've earned the truth. The products are secondary, valuable for funding, but not our primary objective. Then what is? Research. The extraction and quantification of human creativity under controlled conditions. Her voice took on a lecturer's tone. For decades, the collective has been studying the limits of creative potential and the most efficient methods of accessing it. I felt cold despite the whiskey. You're using people as research subjects. Willing subjects who signed comprehensive agreements. She waved her hand dismissively. The psychological stress is unfortunate but necessary. We've found that comfort and security rarely produce innovation. It's pressure, the right kind of pressure, that forces the mind to create new pathways. And the people who don't make it through restoration? Florence's expression hardened slightly. They still provide valuable data points. Not everyone has what it takes, Tyler. You do. That's why you're sitting here instead of in one of those rooms. I thought about Michael, about how close I'd come to breaking him completely in the name of results, about how easily I could have been in his position if my first project hadn't succeeded. The collective isn't about helping people unlock their potential, I said slowly. It's about extracting it, regardless of the damage. Florence smiled, a cold, satisfied expression. Now you understand, and you're very good at it. She stood, leaving her wine half-finished. Get some rest, Tyler. Tomorrow you have 3 new teams to evaluate. As she walked away, I remained frozen in my seat, the weight of her words settling over me. I had become exactly what I feared, someone who valued results over well-being, someone who saw people as resources to be exploited rather than individuals to be developed. And the worst part was how good I'd gotten at it. You were never meant to escape our grasp, Tyler. Florence's words hung in the air between us, each syllable a physical blow. My throat tightened as I tried to process what she'd just said. The executive lounge, which moments ago had felt like a symbol of my success, now seemed like an elaborate trap that had been waiting for me all along. I backed away from her, nearly knocking over my chair. I need some time to think. Florence didn't try to stop me as I stumbled toward the door. Her silence was worse than any argument, the quiet confidence of someone who knew they'd already won. I walked quickly through the hallways, my footsteps echoing against the polished floors. My mind raced through everything that had happened since I'd arrived at the collective, the way they'd known so much about me from the beginning, how easily I'd been molded into exactly what they needed. The faces of the people I'd helped break down in the restoration department flashed before me, especially Michael, who I'd personally dismantled and rebuilt. When I reached my quarters, I swiped my keycard against the reader. The small light blinked red instead of the usual green. I tried again, thinking I might have swiped too quickly. Red again. "Access denied," said the automated voice from the small speaker. I stood there, staring stupidly at the door to what I'd thought was my home for the past 6 months. I tried a third time, more carefully, but got the same result. "Is there a problem, Mr. Rogers?" I turned to find 2 security guards standing behind me. I hadn't heard them approach. One was tall and broad-shouldered, the other shorter but equally solid. Both wore the black uniforms of the collective security team, but I didn't recognize either of them. "My key card isn't working," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Ms. Strickland has arranged new accommodations for you," the taller guard said. "We're here to escort you." I looked between them, then back at my door. "I need to get my things." "Your personal items will be brought to you," the shorter guard said. His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. They flanked me as we walked, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel their presence on either side. We moved away from the residential wing where I'd been living, past the main offices, and toward a section of the compound I'd never visited before. The hallways grew more utilitarian, bare concrete instead of polished marble, fluorescent lighting instead of the warm, indirect fixtures I'd grown used to. The air smelled different too, antiseptic, like a hospital. We stopped at a heavy metal door. The taller guard swiped his card, and it opened with a loud click. Beyond it stretched a corridor with doors spaced evenly along both sides. Each door had a small window and a card reader. They led me to one about halfway down and opened it. Inside was a room about half the size of my previous quarters. A single bed with a thin mattress stood against one wall. A small desk and chair occupied another corner. A doorway led to what looked like a bathroom. The walls were bare white, the floor gray linoleum. "What is this place?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Your new quarters," the shorter guard said. "Ms. Strickland will speak with you in the morning." They stepped back, and the door closed between us with a heavy thud. I heard the lock engage. I stood in the center of the room, trying to make sense of what was happening. This wasn't a living space. It was a cell. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My role had changed. I was no longer a valued member of the collective's leadership. I was now a subject. I sat on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. The mattress was thin and unyielding beneath me. I'd gone from protege to prisoner in the span of a single conversation. I don't know how long I sat there, my mind cycling through denial, anger, and fear. Eventually, I got up and explored my new quarters. The bathroom was small but functional. Toilet, sink, and shower stall, all in the same institutional white as the main room. There was a small window high on the wall in the main room, maybe 8 inches tall and 2 feet wide, with reinforced glass. I stood on the desk chair to look out. The window faced the mountains that surrounded the compound. In the fading evening light, they looked wild and free. Everything this room was not. I stayed there, watching as darkness fell, thinking about what Florence had said. I'd never been meant to escape. This had all been planned from the beginning. My recruitment, my rise through the ranks, even my work in the restoration department, all of it designed to mold me into something they could use. As the last light disappeared from the sky, I made a decision. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't become another subject in their experiments. I examined the window more carefully. It was sealed shut, but the frame looked older than the rest of the building. I tested it, pushing against different spots until I found a section where the seal had started to deteriorate. I took the metal leg off the desk chair and used it as a lever, working it into the weak spot in the window frame. It took nearly an hour of careful pressure, but eventually I felt something give. The window popped partially open, just enough that I might be able to squeeze through. I listened at the door for any sign of guards, but the hallway outside was silent. I pushed the desk against the wall beneath the window, climbed up, and worked at enlarging the opening. When it seemed wide enough, I pulled myself up and wriggled through the narrow space, scraping my sides and back in the process. I dropped to the ground outside, maybe 8 feet below the window. The impact sent pain shooting through my ankles, but nothing felt broken. I crouched in the shadows, waiting to see if anyone had heard me. The night air was cold against my skin. I was wearing only the clothes I'd had on in the office, dress pants and a button-up shirt. Not ideal for an escape into the mountains, but I had no choice. When no alarm sounded, I moved quickly away from the building, staying in the shadows. The compound was surrounded by a high fence, but I remembered from my arrival that there was a maintenance gate on the east side that was sometimes left unguarded at night. I made my way there, moving as quietly as I could. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure someone would hear it. When I reached the gate, I found it locked, but the fence beside it had a section where the ground had eroded, creating a small gap at the bottom. I lay on my stomach and pushed my way under, dirt and gravel scraping against my chest and face. Once outside the fence, I ran. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs threatened to give out. I ran toward the mountains, away from the compound, away from Florence and her chilling words. I had no plan beyond escape. No phone, no money, no ID. Just the desperate need to get as far away as possible. The terrain grew steeper and more difficult as I entered the foothills. I stumbled over rocks and roots in the darkness, falling several times. My hands and knees were scraped raw, my clothes torn. Still, I pushed on. I climbed higher into the mountains, using the stars for navigation. I needed to find a road, a town, some sign of civilization that wasn't controlled by the collective. The night grew colder as I climbed. My thin shirt offered little protection against the mountain air. I shivered constantly, my teeth chattering so hard I worried they might crack. But stopping wasn't an option. By the time the eastern sky began to lighten, I was exhausted beyond anything I'd ever experienced. My muscles screamed with every step. My throat was parched, my stomach empty. But in the growing light, I could make out what looked like buildings in the valley below, a small town. I changed direction, moving downhill toward the cluster of lights. The descent was almost harder than climbing had been. My legs were so tired they threatened to buckle with each step, sending me tumbling down the slope. When I finally reached level ground, the sun was fully up. The town was smaller than it had looked from above, just a main street with a handful of businesses and some scattered houses. A sign welcomed me to Pine Ridge, population 327. I stumbled down the main street, aware of how I must look. Clothes torn and dirty, face scratched, wild-eyed with exhaustion. A few early morning shopkeepers stared as I passed. I needed to find a phone, needed to call someone who could help. But who? My parents were too far away and had no resources to help me escape from something like the collective. My old co-workers from the call center, they'd think I was crazy. There was only one person who might understand, who might be able to help. Dakota. Despite everything, despite knowing he was the one who had recruited me into this nightmare, he was also the only one who knew what the collective was capable of. Maybe, if I explained what had happened, he would help me. I spotted a payphone outside a small convenience store. I didn't know people still use those, but in a town this small, maybe cell service was spotty. I checked my pockets, hoping for loose change. Nothing. I pushed open the door of the convenience store. An older man looked up from behind the counter. "Excuse me," I said, my voice hoarse. "Could I possibly use your phone? It's an emergency." He looked me up and down, taking in my disheveled appearance. "What happened to you, son?" "Hiking accident," I lied. "Got lost overnight in the mountains. I need to call a friend to come get me." He seemed to consider this, then nodded toward a phone on the wall near the register. "Make it quick." "Thank you." I moved to the phone, my hands shaking as I picked up the receiver. I dialed Dakota's number from memory, praying he would answer. The phone rang 3 times before I heard his voice. "Hello?" "Dakota, it's me, Tyler," I said, my words tumbling out in a rush. "I need your help. I'm in trouble. I got out of the compound, but I don't know what to do now. They're going to come looking for me." There was a pause on the other end. "Where are you?" I glanced around the store, looking for anything that might tell me my exact location. "A town called Pine Ridge. I'm at a convenience store on the main street. Another pause. Stay there. I'll come get you. It'll take me a few hours to reach you. Thank you, I breathed, relief washing over me. Thank you. After hanging up, the store owner took pity on me. He offered me a bottle of water and a sandwich from the deli counter, waving away my protests about having no money. You look like you've been through hell, he said. Just pay it forward someday. I sat on the curb outside the store, eating slowly, trying to make the food last. My body ached all over, and now that the immediate danger was past, exhaustion threatened to overwhelm me. I fought to stay awake, knowing I needed to be ready when Dakota arrived. The hours crawled by. I moved to a small park across the street, sitting on a bench where I could see the road into town. Every car that approached made my heart race, but none of them was Dakota. It was mid-afternoon when a familiar luxury sedan pulled into town. I stood up, waving as Dakota slowed and parked near the park. Relief flooded through me at the sight of a familiar face. He got out of the car and walked toward me, his expression unreadable. He was dressed in his usual expensive suit, looking completely out of place in this small mountain town. "Tyler," he said as he reached me, "you look terrible." "I had to climb through a window and hike through the mountains all night," I said. "Not exactly a spa treatment." He didn't smile at my weak joke. "Let's get you in the car." I followed him to the sedan, sinking gratefully into the passenger seat. The leather was soft and cool against my skin, the air conditioning a blessed relief from the afternoon heat. Dakota got in and started the engine but didn't put the car in drive. Instead, he turned to look at me. "What happened?" he asked. I told him everything. Florence's revelation, my locked quarters, the security guards, my escape through the window, the night in the mountains. The words poured out of me, desperate and raw. When I finished, Dakota was silent for a long moment. Then he sighed, a sound that sent a chill through me. "I can't help you escape, Tyler." I stared at him, not comprehending. "What do you mean? You're here. We can just drive away, go somewhere they can't find us." He shook his head slowly. "There is nowhere they can't find us. The collective's reach extends far beyond what you've seen." "Then we'll keep moving," I insisted. "Change our names, our appearances." "You don't understand," Dakota said, his voice quiet but firm. "Your recruitment wasn't a coincidence." I felt something cold settle in the pit of my stomach. "What are you talking about?" Dakota turned in his seat to face me more directly. "Your grandfather was one of the early members of the collective. Did you know that?" I shook my head, stunned. "No, that's impossible. My grandfather was an engineer. He worked for a construction company his whole life. That was his cover, yes, but he was also part of the original research team that established the collective's core methodologies. He had an exceptional creative mind, like you." The cold feeling spread through my body. "I don't believe you." "It's true. The collective has been monitoring your family for generations. You possess a genetic predisposition for creativity that makes you incredibly valuable as research material. Your success in the program was inevitable. It's literally in your DNA." I felt sick. "So our friendship, was that part of the experiment too?" Dakota at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. "We grew up in the same neighborhood because the collective arranged it that way. They wanted someone close to you, someone who could guide you toward them when the time was right. Our whole friendship was a lie?" My voice cracked on the last word. "Not all of it," Dakota said quietly. "But yes, I was placed in your life for a purpose." I couldn't process what he was telling me. My entire life, my childhood, my friendship with Dakota, my struggles and failures, all of it had been manipulated as part of some sick experiment spanning generations. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because you need to understand that you can never truly escape. The collective has resources and connections you can't imagine. They've been planning this for decades. Your recruitment, your rise through the ranks, even your rebellion, it's all part of the data they're collecting." I looked out the window at the small town that had seemed like salvation just hours ago. It now felt like just another stage set in an experiment I couldn't escape. "So what happens now?" I asked, my voice hollow. "I take you back," Dakota said simply. "It's the only option that doesn't end with you dead or imprisoned. The collective protects its investments. And I'm just an investment to them, to you." Dakota didn't deny it. "You're more than that. You're a vital part of research that could change how we understand human creativity and potential. Your grandfather understood that." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of everything crash down on me. I thought about running again, about jumping out of the car and disappearing into the mountains. But what was the point? If what Dakota said was true, there was nowhere I could go that they wouldn't find me. "I trusted you," I said finally, opening my eyes to look at him. "When you showed up in that parking lot, I thought you were offering me a way out of a dead-end life, but you were just leading me deeper into a trap." "I was offering you a purpose," Dakota countered, "a chance to be part of something important. As a lab rat." He shrugged. "We're all part of the experiment in different ways. Even me." I turned away from him, looking out at the town one last time. The small shops, the quiet streets, the mountains rising in the distance, all of it represented a freedom I now understood I would never have. "Let's go," I said, my voice empty of emotion. "Take me back." Dakota nodded and put the car in drive. As we pulled away from the curb, I watched Pine Ridge disappear in the side mirror, along with any hope of escape I had left. I let Dakota drive me back to the compound. What else could I do? The mountains loomed behind us as his car wound up the familiar road, every curve bringing me closer to what I'd just risked everything to escape. My torn clothes stuck to the dried blood on my back and sides from squeezing through the window. The scratches on my face stung in the air conditioning. "You know, they're not going to hurt you," Dakota said, breaking the silence that had stretched between us since we'd left Pine Ridge. "Florence sees too much potential in you." I stared out the window, not bothering to respond. The truth of my situation had settled over me like a heavy blanket. My grandfather had been part of the collective. My father had been watched his whole life. And now, me, the next in line, selected and groomed from the start. We pulled up to the security gate. The same guard who had checked my ID on my first visit glanced at the car, recognition flashing across his face when he saw me in the passenger seat. He nodded to Dakota and waved us through without a word. "They knew I'd bring you back," Dakota said quietly. The main building came into view, its modern architecture no longer impressive but threatening. As we parked, I saw Florence standing at the entrance, hands clasped in front of her, that knowing smile on her face. She didn't look angry or even concerned, just patient, like she'd been waiting for a package that had been slightly delayed in shipping. Dakota walked slightly behind me as we approached her. My legs felt wooden, each step requiring conscious effort. "Welcome back, Tyler," Florence said, her voice smooth as polished stone. "I trust your excursion was illuminating." I looked into her eyes and saw nothing there but calculation. "You knew I'd try to run." "Of course. It's part of the process for someone with your profile." She gestured toward the door. "Shall we discuss your future with us?" As we walked through the entrance, the reality of my situation hit me with crushing clarity. This wasn't a story about my escape or success. It never had been. I was fulfilling a role that had been scripted long before I was born. Another Rogers caught in the machinery of the collective, just like my grandfather before me. Florence led us to a small conference room, not her office. The change felt deliberate, a reminder that my status had shifted. Dakota took a seat beside me, no longer pretending to be my friend, but clearly my handler. "Your grandfather was brilliant," Florence said once we were seated. "But he lacked vision. He couldn't see that sometimes progress requires sacrifice." "What did you do to him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "He made his choices, just as you've made yours." She slid a folder across the table. This outlines your new position within the collective. You'll be working directly with our most promising recruits, helping them reach their potential. I didn't touch the folder. And if I refuse? Florence's smile didn't waver. You won't. You've already proven that you understand what we do here is necessary. Your work with Michael Evans demonstrated that beautifully. The mention of Michael sent a wave of shame through me. I had broken him, reshaped him, all while telling myself it was for his own good. Your restoration begins tomorrow, Florence continued. I suggest you use tonight to reflect on what you truly want from your time with us. Dakota escorted me to my new quarters. Not the cell they'd put me in before my escape, but not my old rooms either. This space was smaller, more functional, with a bed, desk, and bathroom. The door locked from the outside. This is temporary, Dakota said, lingering at the doorway. Cooperate, and you'll be back to your privileges in no time. I sat on the edge of the bed after he left, staring at the blank wall. I had run as hard as I could, only to end up exactly where they wanted me. The restoration process began at 5 the next morning. 2 guards escorted me to the wing I had once supervised. The irony not lost on me as I was led into one of the rooms I had used to break others. Mary Daniels was waiting, her face professionally blank. Hello, Tyler. I'll be overseeing your restoration personally. The next 3 weeks blurred together in a haze of sleep deprivation, psychological pressure, and carefully calibrated stress. They knew exactly which buttons to push. My fear of failure, my desperate need for validation, my guilt over what I'd done to Michael. They showed me fabricated videos of my parents expressing disappointment in me. They played recordings of conversations I'd had in what I thought was privacy. They broke me down systematically, piece by piece, until I could barely remember who I had been before the collective. And then slowly, they built me back up. You're special, Tyler, Florence told me during one session, her voice gentle now, maternal. You understand our work in a way others can't. You've been on both sides now. By the end of the 4th week, I was sitting in meetings again, contributing ideas, receiving nods of approval. They gave me back my tablet, my access to certain parts of the compound, even some new clothes. I played my part perfectly. The prodigal son returned, humbled and ready to serve. But something had changed inside me. A small, hard kernel of resistance had formed, buried so deep that even I could barely feel it most of the time. I smiled when expected, offered insights when asked, and began working with recruits again. But I watched. I listened. I remembered. At night, when I was alone in my new quarters, larger now, a reward for my compliance, I started documenting everything. Not on my tablet, they monitored that, but in my head. I created memory palaces, storing away details of the collective's methods, their objectives, the names of everyone involved. I would lie in bed, eyes closed, mentally walking through the compound, attaching information to every doorway, every piece of furniture, every painting on the wall. Florence began to trust me again. 6 weeks after my return, she invited me to join her for the quarterly review meeting with the board of directors, shadowy figures who appeared only as voices on a conference call, their identities protected. Our work with Subject 437 has yielded remarkable results, Florence reported, referring to Michael by his ID number. After restoration, his creative output increased by 73%, and the quality metrics show significant improvement across all parameters. And what about Rogers? One of the voices asked. Has his restoration been successful? Florence looked at me, that same knowing smile on her face. Tyler has exceeded expectations. His unique perspective makes him invaluable to our work. I believe he's ready to take on more responsibility. I nodded, playing my part. I understand now what we're trying to achieve, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The methods may seem harsh, but the results speak for themselves. The board seemed satisfied, and after the call ended, Florence placed her hand on my shoulder. I'm proud of you, Tyler. You've come so far. I thanked her, forcing warmth into my voice. As I walked back to my quarters that night, I added every detail of the meeting to my mental archive. 2 months after my failed escape, I was fully reintegrated into the collective's hierarchy. I had a team of recruits under my supervision, a voice in planning meetings, and Florence's apparent trust. I had become both victim and perpetrator in their system, using what had been done to me to manipulate others, creating the perfect cyclical trap. But my secret resistance grew stronger. I began to identify potential allies among the recruits and staff, people who showed signs of doubt, who asked questions when they thought no one was listening. I couldn't approach them directly, but I started planting seeds, small comments that might make them question what we were doing. Interesting how the most creative solutions come when people feel safe, not threatened, I mentioned casually to a fellow supervisor during lunch. Makes you wonder if there might be better ways to achieve our goals. I was careful, never pushing too far, always maintaining my facade of dedication. But I was watching for opportunities, waiting for my chance. It came in the form of Eliza Marshall. She arrived with a new group of recruits, a young woman with dark hair and a determined set to her jaw that reminded me painfully of my younger sister. The resemblance was striking enough that I had to look away when Florence introduced her during the orientation meeting. Eliza has an impressive background in computer science, Florence said. We expect great things from her. I reviewed her file later that day. 26 years old, graduated top of her class from MIT, recruited after her startup failed to secure second-round funding. Brilliant, but vulnerable. The collective's perfect target. During her first week, I made a point of observing her team's work sessions. She was sharp, innovative, but I could see the same signs I had shown early on. The desperate need to prove herself, the fear of failure lurking just beneath her confident exterior. When her team hit their first roadblock, I volunteered to provide guidance. The pressure can be intense here, I told her during our first one-on-one meeting. But remember, your value isn't measured by a single project. She looked at me with suspicious eyes. That's not what I've heard. What have you heard? I kept my voice casual, interested, but not too interested. That people disappear when they don't perform. She watched my face carefully. That there's a restoration process. I maintained my neutral expression. The collective invests heavily in its members. Sometimes that means additional support for those who are struggling. She didn't believe me. I could see it in her eyes. Good. I didn't want her to. Over the next few weeks, I positioned myself as Eliza's mentor, earning her trust gradually while subtly feeding her doubts about the collective's methods. I was careful, always aware that Florence might be watching our interactions. At the same time, I began my real work. The collective's computer systems were heavily secured, but my restored status gave me access to more than they realized. Late at night, I started testing the boundaries, looking for weaknesses in their security protocols, documenting everything I found. I created a hidden partition on my tablet, encrypted with a key based on a memory from my childhood that no one at the collective could know. There, I began storing evidence, screenshots of internal memos about failed recruits, recordings of restoration sessions, financial data showing the true purpose of the collective's work. It was dangerous, painfully slow work. One wrong move would trigger security protocols and expose everything. But each night, I added another piece to my collection. 3 months after Eliza's arrival, I made my first attempt at outside contact. The collective monitored all communications, but I had discovered a maintenance terminal in the basement level that connected directly to external systems for software updates. During a power fluctuation that I had quietly arranged, I managed to send a heavily encrypted message to a secure email address I'd memorized years ago, belonging to a college friend who'd become a cybersecurity specialist. I couldn't include details, just a digital SOS with a specialized tracking code that would let him know it came from me without triggering the collective's content filters. I had no way of knowing if the message went through or if he would understand its significance. But it was a start, a thin thread connecting me to the outside world. As I made my way back to my quarters that night, I passed Florence in the hallway. She stopped, studying my face. "Working late, Tyler?" "Just checking on the progress of Eliza's team," I said smoothly. "They're showing real promise." "Yes," Florence agreed, her eyes never leaving mine. "Eliza in particular has caught our attention. Her aptitude scores are remarkable." Something in her tone made my stomach tighten. "She still needs refinement. Her collaborative skills are lacking." "Perhaps, but we have ways of addressing that, don't we?" Florence smiled. "Get some rest, Tyler. We have a board presentation tomorrow, and I want you to present the quarterly results for the restoration department." I nodded and continued down the hallway, my mind racing. Florence's interest in Eliza worried me. I needed to accelerate my plans. The next morning, I delivered a flawless presentation to the board, highlighting the increased productivity of restored recruits while carefully omitting the human cost of our methods. The faceless voices on the conference line expressed their approval, and Florence beamed with pride. "Tyler has become our most valuable asset," she told them. "His methods have refined our entire approach to restoration." The praise made me sick, but I smiled and thanked her. After the meeting, Florence pulled me aside. "I'd like you to take a more active role in Eliza's development," she said. "Her latest project submission showed signs of resistance. I think she could benefit from your personal attention." I kept my expression neutral. "Of course. What kind of intervention did you have in mind?" "Start with the standard protocols. If those don't yield results, we'll move to more intensive methods." She squeezed my arm. "I trust your judgment, Tyler." That afternoon, I called Eliza to my office. She entered warily, her posture defensive. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. I waited until she was seated before continuing. "Your project submission has raised some concerns." "What concerns?" Her voice was steady, but I could see the fear in her eyes. "Your approach challenges several of the collective's fundamental assumptions." I leaned forward. "That kind of independent thinking can be problematic here." She lifted her chin slightly. "I thought we were supposed to be innovative." "Innovation within parameters," I corrected her. I glanced at the door, then lowered my voice. "Eliza, listen carefully. You're being watched more closely than the others." Confusion flickered across her face. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that Florence has taken a personal interest in your development. That's not always a good thing." I stood up and walked to the window, positioning myself so the security cameras couldn't capture my face. "Meet me in the East Garden tomorrow morning, 7:30, for a mentoring session." The East Garden was one of the few areas with minimal surveillance, designed for board members to have private conversations during their rare visits to the compound. Eliza frowned but nodded slowly. 7:30. After she left, I sent Florence a message outlining my intervention plan for Eliza, including the scheduled mentoring session. By providing this information voluntarily, I hoped to avoid suspicion. The next morning, Eliza was waiting when I arrived at the garden. The early sunlight cast long shadows across the manicured lawn. I led her to a stone bench beneath an old oak tree, one of the few places I was reasonably certain wasn't monitored. "Walk with me," I said loudly enough for any distant microphones to pick up. Then, more quietly as we moved among the trees, "The collective isn't what you think it is." Eliza kept pace beside me, her face carefully blank. "What is it then?" "A research organization studying how to extract and quantify human creativity under controlled conditions." I kept my voice low, my eyes scanning our surroundings. "The products, the innovations, those are just byproducts. What they really want is the data." "Data on what?" "On how far they can push people before they break, on what combinations of pressure and incentive produce the best results." I stopped walking, turning to face her. My grandfather discovered their true purpose decades ago. He tried to expose them. They killed him for it. Eliza's eyes widened. Why are you telling me this? Because I need your help, and because you remind me of my sister. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small data drive, pressing it into her hand. This contains evidence of what they're doing here. Financial records, video of restoration sessions, internal memos. I need you to hide it. She closed her fingers around the drive. Why me? Why not get this out yourself? They're watching me too closely, and I need someone with your skills to help me access the secure servers. I started walking again. I'm working on a way to contact the outside world, but I need more time. How do I know this isn't a test? Eliza asked, her voice hardening. How do I know you're not just checking my loyalty? It was a fair question. You don't, but ask yourself this. Have you seen anyone who failed to meet expectations after restoration? Have you noticed how their personalities change? I could see the recognition in her eyes. She had noticed. What do you want me to do? She asked finally. For now, just keep your head down. Continue your work, but be careful about showing too much independence. I glanced at my watch. We should head back. Remember, as far as anyone knows, we just had a standard mentoring session. As we walked back toward the main building, I spoke more loudly about her project, offering suggestions for improvement, playing my role as the dedicated collective supervisor. Over the next few weeks, Eliza and I developed a system of communication, exchanging information during seemingly innocent interactions. She was cautious at first, but as I shared more evidence of the collective's true nature, her resolve strengthened. With her help, I gained access to more secure areas of the collective's network. She created a series of untraceable backdoors that allowed me to gather critical information without triggering security alerts. Together, we built a comprehensive file documenting human rights violations, illegal psychological experimentation, and financial fraud. Meanwhile, I continued my work with the other recruits, maintaining my facade as Florence's trusted lieutenant. Each day was a careful balancing act, showing enough enthusiasm for the collective's methods to avoid suspicion while secretly undermining their entire operation. 4 months after my failed escape attempt, I received confirmation that my outside contact had received my message. A maintenance technician, someone I'd never seen before, brushed past me in the hallway and slipped a note into my pocket. 3 words. Signal received. Waiting. That night, I used one of Eliza's backdoors to send a more substantial message, including coordinates for the compound and a heavily encrypted summary of what was happening inside. I had no idea if it would be enough to prompt action, but it was a start. Florence called me to her office the following week. My heart pounded as I entered, certain that our plans had been discovered, but her smile seemed genuine as she gestured for me to sit. I have exciting news, she said. The board has approved the expansion of our program. We'll be bringing in 30 new recruits next month. I forced myself to smile. That's wonderful. Do we have the capacity for that many? We're renovating the West Wing to accommodate them. Florence leaned forward, her eyes bright with an enthusiasm I'd rarely seen. This is what we've been working toward, Tyler. The ability to scale our operations, to harness creative potential on an unprecedented level. She pushed a tablet across the desk. These are the new protocols I want you to implement. They incorporate everything we've learned from your work with Michael and the others. I scrolled through the document, my horror growing with each page. The new protocols were even more extreme than the current ones, designed to break recruits more quickly, more thoroughly. This is comprehensive, I managed to say. It's the culmination of decades of research, Florence said proudly. Your grandfather would have been amazed at how far we've come. The mention of my grandfather sent a surge of anger through me, but I kept my expression neutral. When do we start? Preparations begin immediately. I want you to train our staff on the new methods. She stood, signaling the end of our meeting. This is your legacy too, Tyler. Everything your grandfather started, you're helping to perfect. As I walked back to my office, I knew we were running out of time. With 30 new recruits arriving soon, we needed to act before more people were subjected to the collective's methods. That evening, I met Eliza in the East Garden again. They're expanding, I told her without preamble. 30 new recruits next month. She paled. We need to move faster. I've made contact with someone outside, but I don't know how long it will take for them to act or if they even can. I ran a hand through my hair. We need a contingency plan. Eliza nodded. I've been thinking about that. The collective's systems are centralized. If we could trigger a complete shutdown during a critical moment, like when all the leadership is gathered in one place. The quarterly board meeting, I said. It's in 3 weeks. Everyone will be in the main conference room. I could create a cascading failure in their security systems, she said, her eyes lighting up with the challenge. But I'd need access to the main server room. I can get you that, but we'll only have one shot at this. I looked at her seriously. If we fail, I know. She met my gaze steadily. But I'd rather try than spend another day watching people being broken. Over the next 3 weeks, we refined our plan, working in secret moments between our regular duties. Eliza created the program that would trigger the system failure while I gathered more evidence and identified potential allies among the recruits and lower-level staff. I also continued sending messages to my outside contact, providing detailed information about the compound's security measures and daily routines. I had no way of knowing if help was coming, but I couldn't afford to rely on it. 3 days before the board meeting, Florence summoned me again. I've been reviewing the security logs, she said without preamble. There have been some unusual access patterns in the system. My pulse quickened, but I kept my expression curious, slightly concerned. What kind of patterns? Multiple logins to restricted areas from authorized credentials, but at odd hours. She studied my face. Your credentials, Tyler. I frowned, the picture of confusion. That's strange. I haven't accessed anything unusual. Could there be a glitch in the system? Perhaps. She didn't look convinced. I've asked IT to investigate. In the meantime, I'd like you to change your access codes. Of course, I agreed readily. Is there anything else I should be doing? Just be vigilant. We can't afford any security breaches with the expansion so close. She dismissed me with a wave. As soon as I left her office, I found a quiet corner and sent an urgent message to Eliza. They're on to us. Change of plans. Tomorrow night. We had less preparation than I would have liked, but we couldn't risk waiting. That evening, I met with 3 recruits I had identified as potential allies, people who had shown subtle signs of resistance to the collective's methods. I couldn't tell them everything, but I gave them enough to secure their help. Tomorrow night, there may be a situation, I told them. If the power goes out, I need you to help guide people to the east exit. Don't try to be heroes, just get as many people out as you can. They asked few questions, which was either a sign of their trust or their fear. Either way, they agreed to help. The next day passed in a blur of tension. I went through my normal routine, attending meetings, reviewing recruit progress, all while watching the clock tick down. Eliza and I had arranged to meet at 9 p.m. near the server room after most of the administrative staff had left for the day.